today's webinar. Today we're joined by Jos Pink from Landstack, and we're going to be looking at the art of identifying and appraising sites. So we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at Landstack and also a look at Aprao, and understand how the two platforms can work together and help you in your process of appraising sites. So I think what's probably best, rather than me trying to do a full intro for Jos, I'm going to let Jos introduce himself, give you a little bit of background, and then we're going to dive into the product in a little bit. So Jos, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. Hope you're having a lovely day. So a bit of a background on Landstack is founded about 2.5 years ago. Essentially, it was founded by a company of chartered surveyors down in the southwest. Sort of, if you think back to 2.5, 3 years ago, you walked into their office and you were met with cabinets filled with folders of local plans, planning applications, titles, and it was a bit of a mess. They were spending a huge amount of time trying to identify land, and in order to do so, they had to go to every single local authority, get all the data they needed to find the land. Long story short, we built more of a glorified CRM system for them, with the aim of providing a standardized set of planning data and everything else across the whole of England. Started in the southwest in a couple of districts, and since then we've expanded to the whole of England. And so really at the start of this year, we've launched Landstack as, officially as a product that anybody can use. And yeah, that's a bit of the background, really. That's Landstack in a nutshell.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Jos. And before we dig into the products, I mean, a lot of the people on this call know me already, but for a bit of background on myself, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Aprao, and Aprao is a cloud-based financial modeling tool for real estate. So basically, our customers are anybody involved in the world of real estate, from property developers to lenders, professionals, valuers, etc. Anybody who's running the financials on a development. What my background, just to give you a little bit of context, I worked in development finance for 10 years before starting Aprao. And as part of that, I was receiving appraisals and feasibilities from developers every day, coming to me looking to secure finance. And I realized very quickly that there was no standardization in the way that people were appraising sites. Everybody was trying to achieve the same thing, but they were all going about it in a totally different way. So normally that's the classic Excel spreadsheets with errors hidden in those formulas and overtyped cells, that kind of thing. Massive margin for human error and very slow processes. So we created Aprao to streamline that appraisal process. And now we've got hundreds of customers using our product internationally. Aprao is a fantastic tool for anybody who's not had a look at it yet, for any development financial modeling. And we also have a 7-day free trial. So if anyone wants to have a look after this, then we'll share a link of how to get involved there. So just a couple of quick things before we dig into the product side of things and we jump into Landstack. If anyone's got any questions as we go through the webinar today, just pop them on the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them if it's relevant in the conversation. And if not, we'll round up the rest of the questions towards the end, and then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A at the end of the call. So I'm going to hand back over to Jos now, and Jos, you can go ahead and jump straight in with Landstack.
Awesome. Okay, so hopefully I'm sharing my screen and everyone can see it.
Yeah.
Best way to think of Landstack is a huge database of planning, development, land registry information. Irrespective of the local authority you want to look at, you'll be looking at the sort of same information standardized to exactly the same level. We've obviously got on Landstack a couple of different ways of interrogating this information: a reporting system, a map, the districts page, and obviously a list of everything that you've identified. Think of the reports as, give me a list of all the sites that have been allocated in the most recent local plans in these five districts. Give me a list of all the planning applications that have been submitted in the last 2 weeks that have gone to appeal, and so on and so forth. The possibilities are a bit endless. What we'll be focusing on today, because I appreciate we don't have all the time in the world, is we'll be looking mainly at the map feature here. It's very visual and it's sort of really what you call the meat and potatoes of Landstack. So if I click into this here, you'll see the map load up. You might just want to, those of you who have a zoom screen of my face at the top right, you might just want to move that because it might be covering some of the stuff that will be on the right-hand side of the screen. I'd suggest putting it at the top of the screen if you can. So looking at Landstack works on a local authority by local authority basis. So you subscribe to the local authorities that you want access to. And you'll be provided obviously the same information in each individual local authority. You'll see those local authorities that I have access to on this left-hand side. I've got access to the whole of England. And on the right-hand side, you've got what we call the global layers. So that's sort of everything that's sort of publicly or commercially available, land registry titles, house price data, and so on and so forth. So we'll get right into it. So, you know, there's lots of different, I appreciate there'll be different people on the call who'll have different reasons to be identifying land, from land agents to, you know, SME house builders, larger house builders, promoters. We'll go through sort of immediate and strategic and sort of the different ways you could look at using Landstack to identify land, but we'll probably just start by looking at the data. So you'll notice at the top of my screen, it's telling me the local authority I'm currently looking at. So I'm looking at Dorset. If I move over to the northwest here, you'll see I then end up in Mendip. And if I want to load the information in Dorset, I can either just click the word Dorset at the top of the screen here, or if I don't know where the local authority is in England, I can always find it in this list on the left-hand side here. So I'm going to click to load the information in Dorset. You'll see a large amount of information load here, and we'll just quickly go through what you're looking at. So I'll take some of these layers off to make it a bit clearer. So we're actually going to be focusing more on the sort of south side of Dorset here, but we'll go through the information sort of one by one. So planning applications, I can click to load. You'll see on this left-hand side, Dorset has appeared. I can click to load the planning applications here. And what you're looking at then is all of the residential and mixed use planning applications above 3 units since 2012 loaded on the screen. You'll notice that you get obviously the location plan boundaries of these sites. So you can pick any sort of settlement and you can very easily see what development's happening in and around the settlement. So if I went up to Stolbridge here, for example, you can see the different planning applications, the different pieces of land that they've been put in on. And then crucially, you can also see based on the color of the outline, the decision of that planning application. So if I click this one, blue, it's a pending planning application. If it's got a green outline, it's granted. If it's got a red outline, it's refused. There are some others, orange means withdrawn, and so on. But if we just look at Stolbridge really quickly, we've got a really good idea for what planning's happened previously. If I click on this planning application, classic, it's a Gladman development. If I go maybe a bit to the west, Lightwood Strategic have had an application granted, and we can also see what's potentially coming forward. So Land Value Alliances, and again, Gladman again there. So you can get a really quick idea for that. The next step then really is have a look at what's been allocated. So if you're looking for immediate land, you've got your list straight away there in terms of planning applications that are around. If you want to start thinking a little bit more strategically, the next step would then be to load the most recent local plan, and that's this set of allocations here. And then if I just zoom out and take these planning applications off quickly, this is the most recent set of allocations from the local plan of that local authority. Now, those of you who know your planning well will know Dorset's slowly becoming unitary. So it can be an amalgamation of local plans. In this case, I think it's just the one that they've published as a unitary local plan. And what you're looking here is at all the land that's been allocated in the most recent document they published. To be really clear for the planning nerds again, that's Reg 18, Reg 19, and then eventually when they post the adopted allocations, the set of adopted allocations. And so first point is you can then really quickly click to load your planning applications, and you'll see which allocations have already got planning on them, and then potentially some opportunities straight away. Has the whole allocation, is it all controlled? Is the whole thing controlled? Potentially there's another landowner there that you could talk to. So let's move away from Stolbridge because we're going to be focusing on this area here, Wimborne Minster, and you can see good number of applications gone in already, and also a huge amount of land that's been allocated. What we might want to do before we go into super detail is just look at the land availability assessment layer. That's all the land that's been put forward in the most recent call for sites or land availability assessment. And this will obviously give you an indication as to which landowners are keen for development and also what the local authority's opinion of those pieces of land are. So as soon as you start thinking even more strategically, this is a crucial layer. And so just quickly, in the same way, you'll notice that these have different outlines. We rate them positively or negatively like this, and that's based on what the local authority's opinion of that piece of land is. They'll generally give it a suitability, achievability, developability, availability. set of criteria. If it meets all of those, we give it positive, otherwise it's negative. Now, crucially, with all the stuff you're seeing, you can click on them and get more information. So in the case of, let's say, this SHLA here, I can see it's from the 2020 SHLA. If I click the View Planning Info button, this will then show you some detailed information about the site. So this is all from that local authority document. So, what the use is, whether it's availability, so they've owner identified, not owned by the public authority, and obviously any contamination or any other issues the site might have. So it gives you a really good set of initial options for the site. You can then do the same with allocations. So if I want to check an allocation, I can view the planning info again, and that'll then give you the information from the local plan document for that specific site. So we can see what the land's been allocated for and what the local authority are thinking about the site. And then obviously when we're looking at planning applications, let's say, for example, actually, I'll have a look at this Bloor home scheme to the top here. You'll see you've got the reference number, the applicant down the bottom left for Bloor homes, and then I can click the View Planning Info button, and that will show you the information, obviously, from that outline application itself. And then I can also click this Show Reserved Matters button, and then it will also show you the reserved matters associated with the site too. Cool. If you want to see the application on the local authority's website, click the reference, and that'll take you through to, after this, the application on the local authority's website. So you can obviously get any more detailed documents or anything else you want like that. Now, crucially, a couple points on this. One, we don't show you all the planning applications as one layer. We try to simplify things for you so you don't get hundreds of layers on top of each other. We try to tell you the most important information, obviously huge outline and planning applications, and then reserved matters or any applications submitted subsequently on top of are added into that little list I showed you just there. Okay, let's get into the identification part. We're going to have a look at this settlement here. I think the first thing that everybody will be crying out with, well, this is great, but I know Dorset and it's hugely constrained. There's a huge green belt, there's a lot of AONB, and there's a lot of floodplain. So I'll just zoom out quickly. You can click to load the constraints here. And if I just actually zoom out a little bit more, just to show you, what we do on the main map is you give you the big three: AONB, greenbelt, floodplain. This gives you a really good indication as to why development has gone where it's gone if you look at settlements. But then if we go back into Wimborne Minster, we can get a really good idea for, again, why planning's gone where it's gone, potentially why most of these SHLAs have a negative rating, and then also where there could be some potential opportunities. I can load my satellite view here, let that load in for a second, and then you can get an idea for green space too. So if I take my planning layers off for a second, you can get an idea. Okay, so the green belt, interestingly, hugely constrains this. So if you're looking for a site here, you need to be looking at what the local authority is saying. They're probably looking at green belt release, and they've identified some sites initially that would be good for that. And so this would be your starting point in this area. So let's say we put our planning on, we can see which allocations already have planning. It gives us a bit of small set of sites we'd want to look at. The next step then is to look at the site, check the information on it like I showed, but then obviously have a look at land registry. So who owns the site? So we click on this one, looks interesting. Let's say we check the information, we'll click the View Planning Info just to see how much allocation, how many units it's been allocated for, and potential issues. So you can go through the information here, notice that they say it should be concentrated in the northern part of the site to limit impacts on the nearby listed building, and so on and so forth. So you can get some really crucial information from that. But let's just say, for argument's sake, we're happy with the site, we really like the look of it, we'll want to check the titles. And so that's where you go over to this right hand side over here. So you'll see global layers. I've got a titles option. I can click to load that. And what this will then do, and you got, if anybody's used systems before, you'll know the land registry title layer. This will show you the land registry title. Now you'll notice it's already telling us that the proprietor is a privately owned, so it's private ownership. If I click the site to the left of this, you'll also notice that we actually do tell you if we know who owns the site. And again, this is the classic stuff. If it's a local authority, if it's a PLC, if it's a charity, housing associations, those will all appear here. If it's not one of those entities, well, obviously the Queen as well, because she owns a lot of land. If it's not one of those entities, it will appear as a private ownership. And so what we need to do is buy the title. So I can click this link, and that will take us through to the land reg, where I can put our info, my business info in, and then obviously you can just buy the title from this. So I might just do test, next. I won't buy the title and show all the personal info, but you can buy the title from this point, and you could see who owned the land. You could obviously check options and everything else. And then we get the green light on that. We think, great, this is a cracking site. We want to move forward. So then your next step is to just do a bit of a quick initial feasibility assessment. So we know it's been allocated, so that's a positive, but it did mention a listed building in the document. So let's go back to this site-specific view, which shows us the site-specific info. And you'll notice on this right-hand side, you can move away from planning, and we can actually have a look at a detailed constraints analysis. So I click this, and it will then search through about 32 different constraints, and will list those that are intersecting or close to the site on this right-hand side. Now, obviously, we've got the green belt. We know about that. Let's take that off. We can see actually there's the listed building it's talking about, grade 2 listed one. If I wanted to get a bit more info, I can click on it, follow the link, and that will take you through to the Historic England entry, so you can get an idea for what the listed building is that we're looking at. And then also we can see a bit of green space, a bit of ancient woodland, but fundamentally not a lot constraining our site, probably why it's been allocated. Just to give you a rough idea about all the things we could show: scheduled ancient monuments, SSSIs, pretty much everything that you'd see on your magic map. We do also offer conservation areas and things like that as well. And so great, we think this is good, unconstrained. Next step then is, if we've got a sort of pound per square foot area we're looking at, we want to make sure that it falls within the price range that we're looking for. We can do a comparables check. So a couple ways of doing that. We'll do it through the main map. So I'll take most of this information off now and just load this set of allocations and also the planning. So we can see that a couple planning applications have gone in. So a really good starting place for our comparables would be, okay, recent planning applications, they've gone in, what were the sale values like there? So you'll notice that we've got a comparables layer on the right-hand side. So we can click this comparables layer, and then this will show us some quite detailed, so a heat map showing you the postcodes, green being high pound per square foot, red being low pound per square foot, and that's all in comparison to the rest of the local authority. So here I'm looking at it in comparison to the rest of Dorset. And what we're looking at here is, if I load the allocations on top, this site we're looking at, it's fairly middling, but in terms of the planning application we were looking at, actually a bit on the high side. So if we want to get an idea for that, we can then click on the postcode that we're interested in, and it will start showing you on this right-hand side just a quick idea about the pound per square foot values there. So we've got detached and semi-detached houses there, selling for about sort of £350 a square foot. If you wanted to, you could do some more detailed searches. So if I wanted to get a list of these and maybe put them in a CSV or something, I can do a search for comparables option. I can click to do a polygon, and then what I'll do is I'll just say, look, I want to actually collect all the house prices. Let's just go within this planning application here. It'll collect them, and then it will show you them down here in the pound per square foot average. And then I can download this CSV, and then this will give me a list. Might be interesting to share this. Hang on, give that a second. Hang on, I'll have to share my desktop. That will give you something like this. So this is the obviously average comps, and then the breakdown of where these comps have come from. So each individual house, the amount it's sold for, pound per square foot value, and so on and so forth, which you will obviously be picking up on where we're going here. Will lead very well into what Daniel was about to show you in a second. Just a couple more points is, once we've had a look at that, we can do searches around the site too. But the last thing to mention is you can also add and mark sites that you want to record. So let's say I'm looking at this site here, land north of Wimborne Road. I've looked at the south, we really like it, privately owned. I want to maybe share that with a planner just to get a second opinion. I want to share that with a colleague of mine who maybe doesn't have a Landstack account. I can just duplicate the site by either mapping it here or just duplicating the shape. So I'm just going to quickly map this. I'm going to put it in an identified site in Dorset, and then I'm just quickly going to, forgive my brief things here, map that. It gives me rough size and acreage, rough number of units you could fit on the site, although we're comfortable that that's an approximation based on the acreage, and we've got a more accurate figure from the allocation itself. If I view this page, I've then got a share option. So I can click share. I want to share it privately. I can then put some attached files. I can put a description in. I can add, give the site name, put the address and postcode in. If I click save, this will then give me a link that I can send to anybody. So think of this as a private YouTube video, if you want a good analogy. I can post this if we want. I don't know if I have the ability, but this will be interesting. I can try and post it in the chat. Hang on a second. Chat. And all you guys will be able to click on that, and you'll be able to see basically exactly what I'm seeing. So the site itself, the planning info on the site, and then click outside to see it within a mile of the site, and so on and so forth. And you can send that to anybody, right? Think of that as, you know, if you want to go as far as marketing the site, you could do, but obviously if it's just a private link to send somebody, you could do that as well. There's honestly quite a bit more to go through, but I feel like, Daniel, I'm running low on my my time allocation. If you want, I'll hand it back over to you. The next step obviously would then be to do a much more detailed analysis, potentially residual valuation or something. And that's really over to where Daniel would take over.
Definitely. All right, Jos. No, that was great. Really good run through. So yeah, as Jos said, I'm going to take over now. And we were discussing this yesterday. We just chose this as a classic example of a site. But I'm now going to show you how we can apply that into Aprao. So we can take that information and do a residual residual land value to understand how much a site is really worth. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Jos, are you able just to confirm that you can see that your side?
I can. Perfect. Yeah.
All right.
And just quickly, Daniel, I've just seen all the questions. I didn't look at them before. We'll answer them at the end if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll jump. I was thinking that we'll jump in at the end and we'll answer those questions, because there may be things that we cover anyway.
Yeah.
So this is Aprao. So this is the Aprao board or dashboard where you actually everybody's got all of the sites that they're working on. So we use this as our deal management or project management, pipeline management way of working. So all of these deal stages are fully customizable. So I mean, just to give you an idea, I can take a site, I can progress it through from under review, in negotiation, and a live project. But today we're going to be working with the site that Jos was talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my templates. I've got a residential development template which I'm going to use. So I'm going to create a project from that template. When I do that, it adds it into my sites to review. So here you can see a list of my sites to review, a list of information to capture on this project. So this is a template I set up, and we can put info like the planning info, planning reference, planning status. We can literally pull this, copy and paste this over from Landstack and put it straight into the Aprao project here. The one thing that I did just pre-populate in this template was the site address, which I'm going to put in as the site address on the project. On the template, we can actually, you can customize all of these headings and all of the information and put in whatever information you want. You can even link to things like linking to architect's drawings, for example. Just as a very quick high-level example, you can link to that, but you can link to any document storage that you've got. You can link to planning, etc. Then down at the bottom here is the appraisal that sits within this template. You can have as many appraisals as you want on a project, and you can also have as many versions or iterations once you start appraising a site. So what I'm going to start with here is I'm just going to run you through the template very quickly so you can see what I've got, and then we're going to populate it with information from Landstack. So I've got my standard house types. So I'm just saying, let's say there's a 2, 3, and a 4-bedroom house that I'm used to developing. And so I've got house type A, B, and C in the mix. We're going to be able to put the unit numbers into there in a second. And that's going to give us our area. And that area can be used in the build cost section. I'll come on to that in a second as well. I've also made some assumptions around other costs. So we can set costs either as an amount in pounds or in currency, a percentage of the build cost, or a percentage of the GDV. When you create a template with these assumptions, the moment we populate the sales, it will feed through into the build, and then that will feed through into all of the other costs, including the finance and the residual site value, which we'll come to in a minute. So coming back to the sales side of things, as Jos pointed out, the average pounds per square foot for that area, for that development, was about £352 per square foot. So I'm going to take that as my assumption for this project. And now it's 139 units. So we can obviously play around. With the split of units if we want to. Well, I'm just going to quickly add in, just for simplistic sake, I'm going to add in 50, 50, and 39. So I can easily calculate there's 139 units. The split, though, we can play around with, and I'll show you in a minute how to run through different scenarios. But what I've done is, because I already have my house types, which I'm working with, and my square footages, I put in that pounds per square foot, and then I've just put the number of units in, and that's given us this high-level summary of all of the units within the development. It's also given us our total area for the project, which we can see here. So now, when I jump over to the build section, we can see that there's 200,000 square foot, the amount from that sales area, which is now available to bring into the project. So I've made an assumption here on the build costs, and I've kept it high level at £160 per square foot, because that's what I normally work on if I'm a developer of this type of development. Obviously, you can set your own assumptions there. So what I'm now going to do is bring that square footage into the appraisal. And so what it's done is it's taken that net saleable area, or NIA, net internal area, and we've then got our gross area. Because these are houses, the net and gross is generally the same. But if you were doing an apartment building, you can adjust the net to gross, or if there's other areas that you need to build, then you can obviously adjust that or change the gross area like this. I've got a contingency on this build as well down here. And now what we can see is when we jump over to the other costs, all of these are now pre-populated because I had these assumptions like the architect, the engineer, planning consultant, the QS on the project. All of these assumptions were already in. There's a couple that I don't know, like a section 106 and SIL, which I've not calculated yet. So I can either put in high level assumptions or I can just leave these blank, but have them there as a prompt, for example, if I to make sure I don't forget them. Finally, I've got some marketing costs in there as well that follows the same logic. I set this template up with some standard finance terms. So I've assumed debt at 50% of GDP. But I'm going to come back to this in a minute just to explain why. So with the site purchase now, this is the most interesting point, because what we can do is we can set a target return. So we're trying to calculate the residual site value here. So we can work to your target metric, whatever it is you're looking to work with. So let's say it's 20% of total development, a target return of 20% of cost. I put 20% in here. This will populate a residual site value over on the left here. And the algorithm in Aprao works backwards. So it will take into consideration the sales, the build, all of the other costs, the finance, etc., and to drive that residual value. You can also choose the existing use class. So obviously stamp duty on the site would be very different if it's an existing residential use class or non-residential or mixed use. And you can also override that with custom stamp duty as well if you need to. So this is taking that into consideration. And we can now apply that residual site value into our project. So this has made our return on cost now 20%. And we can see that that residual site value is £19 million. So very quickly, I've gone from Jos's high-level information, well, detailed information in Landstack, but pulled out the high-level information from a financial perspective. And I've been able to calculate that high-level residual site value exceptionally quickly. Now I can get a bit more granular if I want to, because I can jump back into the finance and understand what difference the cost of financing the project will have on the site value. So just as an example here, my 50% of GDV, which was my assumption for my bank debt, is 60% of cost. I can obviously tweak that if I knew my lender would go to 70% of cost, for example. I then can do two things when it comes to interest. So with my background in banking, we went into a lot of detail with this finance section, but we've got a very easy way for you to be able to calculate the estimated interest cost over the life of a project. So I can simply estimate a term of 24 months on this project. It might be slightly longer, it might be 36 months, for example. And what Aprao is doing in the background is using its algorithm to calculate the construction costs over an S-curve for the length of time of the project. So without you needing to do any cash flow forecasting at this stage, you're able to easily understand the implications of timing on your residual site value. I know this is a lot to take in, but it's really important. So here we've got £3.5 million worth of interest on this site. When I come back to this residual site value, you can now see this was the original residual site value before finance. Now, when we factor in the cost of that finance, our residual site value has dropped down to 15.8 million, which obviously is a big difference. And as you can see from the return on cost, the profitability of the site is now down at 12%. So I can now update my residual site value as such, and that tells me that somewhere in the 15.8 million mark is the correct residual site value for this site. Now, I'm going to just show you another couple of quick tweaks, because there's one thing to think about here, and that's obviously the split of units. So I've got my initial residual appraisal here. I'm just going to create a copy, which is another version, so you can see that there's two now. I'll jump into this one, and I'll just call it updated residual appraisal. We can put a summary or a description about the project in here if we want to. For the interest of time today, I'm going to keep things moving though. So I'm just going to jump into the sales section. Now let's say, for example, rather than this 50-50-39, we might have a 70, I'll keep the maths nice and simple, 70-30 and 39 for these units. So this has broken the split down, it's changed the split. So we've got more of the smaller house type and less of the medium house type. As a result then, this is going to change our square footage. So I come to the build section and it's changed ever so slightly the square footage, but that still has an effect. And then what that's going to do is it's going to have a knock-on the residual site value. This wasn't a massive change, but you can still see that that has had an impact in terms of the residual site value. So, I mean, just as a very quick example, you can run through these scenarios very quickly, very easily to understand the impact. And this might be as simple as actually being able to get an additional 10 units on the site. So I just added 10 units in here. I add that square footage, and suddenly my residual site value, by having 10 more of the 5-bed houses on this site, maybe by expanding the envelope of the developed area, I've now got 16.9 as my residual site value. So Aprao is a great tool for quickly and easily assessing these scenarios. And we've got customers of ours that actually use this real time for negotiating on sites. So we did a webinar recently with the Land and New Homes Network, who often said that they often use Aprao when negotiating with landowners, because Aprao is a cloud-based tool, so you can access it on any device. So you could be there with an iPad, for example, and you can explain what's going on with your numbers. You know, I need to make a minimum of 20% profit margin. These are my sales values based upon comparables. This is all of our other costs and information, you know, all of the costs we need to factor in. And you can explain to that landowner that the site you're willing to pay 15.6 and understand the logic, help explain the logic as to why, versus the 18 or 20 million that somebody is asking for a site. So just a couple of quick things before we jump into those questions. So from here we can generate a report. This report is automatically populated with all of the information that we've just covered in Aprao, even things like the location map are there. We can link to documents in the summary section. I didn't put anything in this example, but we can have those planning links, we can have the document links, etc., all within the report. We've got a perfect one-page financial appraisal or feasibility, and then it goes into a breakdown section by section with all of our units. And it will also get to the bottom where we've also got our sensitivity analysis, which looks at what happens if values go up or down, and what happens if build costs go up or down on the projects to help manage risk. A bit like Landstack, we also have the ability to share by secure link. So using this feature here, you can actually create a unique link, as Jos said, much like sharing a private YouTube video or a folder on a file on Dropbox or Google Drive. We can create this unique link, and you can share this with anybody. I'll just paste it into the browser here. You can share it with anybody, whether or not they're an Aprao customer. They can have a view of a read-only version of that appraisal. If they are an Aprao customer though, they can actually save a copy of that to their own personal board. So when I click that, you can see that that arrives back onto my personal board. I've just sent it to myself, but if that were somebody else that you were sending it to, they would then have a copy of that they can edit. So just as an example, we're working with United Trust Bank as a bank. They can receive appraisals by link. So you could send that to your relationship manager at United Trust Bank. They can accept that link and they can view it and have an editable version their end. Like Jos said, there's many more things which we can do in Aprao. We've not even touched on the cash flow forecasting, but we've got the ability to run detailed cash flow forecasts, which generates IRRs and equity IRRs. You can export that to Excel, many more things. But the purpose of today was to get to that all-important residual site value, which we've done. And now we understand that that site that Jos identified, our residual site value, what we can afford to pay or what we're willing to pay on that site would be, in this case, £16.9 million. So let's jump back into some of those questions.
Do you want me to take it from the top, Daniel?
Yeah, let's start from the top. And actually, just as working from the bottom, because the last one is relevant to Aprao, and then we'll jump back to Landstack. Okay. So Ravinder asked, he said, excellent tool. Thanks, Ravinder. Made my day. Is the build cost detailed or per square foot? Well, the great thing here is that we can go, I'll just show you very quickly, we can go as granular as we want when it comes to build cost. So I was doing a quick residual appraisal where we had a single line item, I assumed £160 per square foot. But we can actually add as many build costs as we want, and literally hundreds, thousands, it's unlimited number of build costs. We can also rename these to whatever we want, and we can either set a pounds per square foot, or we can set an amount in pounds, which will calculate the pounds per square foot working backwards. We can also have as many phases as we want. So we can add as many phases with as many costs. So to answer your question, we can start from a high level, or we can go super granular, and you can also invite other team members onto this. So you might have your QS or your construction manager, somebody external or internal who's able to come in and really drill down on that build cost. So I hope that answers your question. Now, back up to the questions for you, Jos. So Ro was asking, how regular are your data refreshes from the local authorities?
So depends on the data set you're talking about. Planning applications are weekly. That's updated. You know, we download everything on a Saturday, Sunday, and then push it to the platform throughout the week. Obviously, allocations, land assessments, it depends on the local authority's update schedule. But generally speaking, it's a couple of weeks after the local authority publish it on their website, and that also depends on the document we're working with. Those of you who know, you'll sometimes they'll publish a PDF, which is thousands of pages with one site on each page. That would, for Wiltshire, for example, that would take longer than a set of draft allocations. So it does vary in terms of what the local authority do to provide the data. And then kind of on that as well, that's obviously the planning side of things. Constraints are all provided by Natural England and the providers. So those are upgraded when they upgrade them, and land registry and stuff like that on a monthly basis. Those of you who are familiar with that will know how the land registry stuff works. Thank you for the question.
Perfect. Okay. Ro also asked, and also from the various sources that provide the overlays. Oh, okay. That was about the data.
Yeah. Just quickly, the various sources that provide the overlays obviously varies. Land reg for land reg, local authorities for local authorities. The house price data comes from the land reg price paid data that they publish monthly. I'm trying to think if there's anything. And then, constraints do come from the various different, so Historic England, Natural England, conservation areas are obviously from each local authority. We try and get them from the main source, if that makes sense, all of our data.
Okay, perfect. Right, I think that was the questions regarding LandStack. I can see there's a couple extra ones that have just come in on Aprao side of things. So Ro asked about adding extra categories to the Aprao main page. So where I had those deal stages and being able to customize those, we currently operate on, we've got three core categories on the board, on the default board. We do have the ability, or in the pipeline, the ability to add extra stages into this. So if you've got additional pipeline stages which you work to, you'll be able to obviously continue beyond those three. But we also, on the team board, we have extra deal stages. This is just a single user account that I'm using today, so I don't have the team board. But ultimately, on that team board, you would see the same stages which are customizable to the team, because you may have the first three stages of your pipeline that you as an individual look at, and then when you share with the team, that might start with, you know, head of land signing off, then for board approval, and then with your funder, for example. And so those stages are fully customizable separately on the personal and on the team board. And in the future, we will have those additional deal stages to continue the pipeline beyond where it sits. There was also another question from Nick about discount cash flow and cash flowing in general. Aprao, yes, we have a full cash flow with up to 10 years, 10-year cash flow at the moment. I will mention though that we are focused on development. So it's not an investment model, it is a development model. But what we have built is rent capitalization within the commercial features in Aprao. So you can work with residential, commercial, or mixed use, and understand the yield, the rent-free period, etc. And that will come back and calculate a capital value for any commercial unit. Obviously, you can then cash flow out the entire project as well, to understand the IRRs and the returns when factoring in time. I can see there's just been a few questions jumping in on the Q&A section as well. So let me just see. So Patrick has asked, will the two ever integrate in the future? Good question, Patrick. Both of us are tech businesses, and yes, absolutely, cloud-based tools. We believe, or I believe anyway, that the future of technology is all around integrations and creating an ecosystem rather than these siloed pools of information. So yes, it's definitely something on the horizon for the future. So watch this space. And I mean, unless you've got anything else to add to that, Jos?
No, I mean, I echo the same point, really. I agree. What we're aiming for is obviously an ecosystem where all this information is shareable between many services. Would love basically exactly the same thoughts as you, Daniel.
Yeah, perfect. No, and I think it's for many tech businesses, there's a prioritization from an engineering perspective around developing features for the product, but also developing these integrations and these partnerships to create this ecosystem. And it's a delicate balance, but we're both open to the discussion here. And also, you know, from our perspective as well, it's not just data coming into Aprao. We're also looking at things that come out from Aprao. So whether that's feeding cash flow information into an accounting tool. So it's kind of like it's a two-way thing, in the same way that Landstack has got data coming into it, as well as we're talking about obviously data coming out of it. Patrick asked, will Aprao ever integrate with Trello? Well, it's an interesting point. So our head of our lead engineer is actually formerly from Atlassian, who is the company behind Trello. But at the moment, no, not integrating with Trello. But we do obviously have the ability we've got that same functionality as Trello within Aprao, where you can have your deal stages and your cards, which are essentially your projects. The one thing I would say is, because we've got the ability to hyperlink, you can link to a Trello card. So you could have a project which is linked to a Trello card on your Trello board, or you could link directly to your Trello board. And the great thing there is that it allows you to take, if you're using Trello already, it can take whoever's looking at that development in Aprao, take them straight to that Trello card. Now, I'm never going to say never. It definitely is something that we would consider from an integrations perspective, either directly or using something like Zapier, to anybody who knows what that is, to be able to link the two up. But right now, the link is the best way to do it. Final question on here from Patrick. Will there be a way to publish or PDF the cash flow? You can do that right now. The cash flow can be exported because of the delights of formatting with cash flow forecasts. They can be anything from 6 months to 10 years, which obviously becomes quite a monster of a cash flow. So the way in which we advise that right now is just exporting that into Excel, choosing your own PDF settings. You can choose whether that's spread over A4 sheets, A3 sheets, or on a massive screen. Completely flexible, and it allows you to export that as a PDF from there. I have seen that there's a few more. Patrick says, sorry to bombard, but no worries, Patrick. It's good to have the Aprao, let's have a quick look at this. When you quickly tweak the unit numbers like you did, you then had to go to the build cost and update that in terms of errors. Sometimes you can miss this. It'd be good if you either alerted or updated the build cost automatically. So there's a reason that we don't do this automatically. So as Patrick said, when I updated the sales areas, I had to then just click update within the build cost section. And that's because sometimes we might have multiple phases, for example, and we may have multiple build cost breakdowns. So sometimes the square footage that we're adding may not be kind of like our main build. So we wanted to give the power to the user to select where that square footage goes. Today was a very high level example. So it was all going into one build phase. But let's say you've added in underground parking or basement construction on a development of square footage, it's going to have a very different build cost to above ground construction, for example. So we want to provide the user with a way of being able to allocate that on a site, on a phase by phase or construction grouping by basis. It'd be good if there were, say, sliders that could quickly change unit numbers and build costs. We do have a way to quickly tweak. I won't jump back into it now, but you can literally nudge the values up on a pounds per square foot basis by 1 or 2, or adjust them by 5, and then the build cost as well to see that. And you can see real time over on the right, the metrics they update real time, so you see that information coming through. Patrick's had a response to one of my questions. The Excel report has less info though. We used to have a summary export from Excel. That's no longer the case. We now export exactly what you see in the Aprao cash flow, so the full itemized breakdown, into that Excel export, so you now have all of that information. And so thanks very much for your questions, Patrick. We've got one more coming in from Ro on the main chat, and then we're probably going to have to wrap it up after this. What's the easiest and simplest way to compare multiple versions of the same deal against each other? Quite often, the numerous variables need to be compared side by side with different inputs. That's a good point. On the deal itself in Aprao, we have the key metrics on a project which are visible side by side instantly, so you can see them there. My advice on this is very simply generating the report or the summary report and having those on a side-by-side basis, because Aprao creates a like-for-like appraisal. So you're always working that consistent format, and that summary appraisal is a one-pager. So you can see that on one page and very quickly understand all of those key metrics. Now in the future, there's scope for features which allow us to do a bit more detailed side-by-side analysis and comparison between scenarios. But right now, that's definitely the best way, which that I would advise. I'd advise working. Right. Well, that was quite a lot of questions. So
yeah, it was.
Clearly an engaged audience. Look, Jos, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
Only if anyone's interested, support at landstack.co.uk. If you'd like to get a trial, we offer a trial. Generally speaking, it depends on how wider area you want of England for a trial. So just get in touch, let us know. And also thank you, Daniel, for your time for setting this up. Really appreciate it.
No worries. And yeah, from my side, anyone who wants to take a look at Aprao, head over to appraisal.com. You can sign up for a free 7-day trial. And also feel free to reach out to us at hello@appraisal.com. Thank you, Jos, and thank you everybody for joining. Yeah, we'll be releasing a recording of this, so feel free to share that with anybody that you think would find this interesting. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.